Toastmasters and welcome guests. When I first graduated out of college, I fell into the same problem that many young graduates coming out of school fell into, which is that we sort of give into this. We finally see money in our bank accounts, and we sort of give into this. We finally give into this cooped up demand for shiny new material things that's been building in our guts for all those years that we were living off of student loans and craft dinner. So it wasn't long before I realized that I wasn't really building up any net worth, and if I was ever going to be able to afford a home in Toronto, which even at the prices back then were kind of ridiculous, I knew that I was going to have to make some changes. So I spoke to some of my colleagues in finance, and these are people that manage people's money for a living, so they're a pretty smart bunch. And today, just because I like you guys, I'm going to share with you the secret to personal finance that I've learned both from my own personal experience and from talking to my successful colleagues in finance. So without further ado, the secret is save and invest and repeat. Okay, so I realized that was a little anticlimactic. There's nothing overly new or creative about the idea. But I think what it does is it sort of articulates what all of us kind of know intuitively in the back of our minds, and it sort of summarizes it into a nice, short, succinct statement that we can put into practice. So saving alone isn't going to get us anywhere, as we know, because saving a dollar saved is just a dollar saved. Investing alone is not going to get you anywhere either, because if you don't save, you're not going to have any capital with which to invest. But when you put the two together and you make this a daily habit, that's when the magic happens. So back then, I knew about saving because that's all I ever did. All I ever saw my parents do growing up was save. But investing, I didn't know a whole lot about. So one day, a friend of mine told me, this is back in 2006, that a major credit card company was about to go public, and I should buy the stock. And so I went and did a little bit of research, and I thought, credit cards, everybody uses credit cards, and this company was going public for the first time, meaning it's the first time in the history that people, the general public, people like you and I, could go and buy shares in the company. So I thought, what the heck? I went to the bank, opened myself a brokerage account, bought shares the first day that I could, and watched as the shares started to go up and up and up. So over the next few months, whenever I had spare cash lying around, I would go and buy more shares, and watched as the shares continued to go up. And after a while, I was hooked, to the point where I would start, cutting back on my personal expenses, eating out less, just to free up some cash to buy more shares. At one point, I even started selling off my personal belongings on Kijiji. Actually, back then it was Craigslist, just to free up more cash so that I could buy more shares. So little did I realize it, but I inadvertently started to put into practice this save and invest strategy. And just in case you don't think that some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs and businesses use this strategy, I'm just going to tell you a couple of short stories. When I first started working as an accountant, I was working for a CPA whose clients were all dentists. And as we know, dentists are some of the most some of the more financially well-off people in business. But then I started looking at the bank statements for these dentists, and you know what I saw? I was expecting to see hundreds of thousands of dollars in these bank accounts, but they're always in zero or negative cash balances. These are dentists. I couldn't figure it out. Now, back then I was kind of junior, so I didn't really question it. But I'll tell you what was happening here in a few moments. Fast forward a couple years later, I was working for a established manufacturing plant out in Toronto's East End. I don't want to tell you what they make for fear that I'm going to give away who they are. But just suffice to say that it was a really thriving operation. I mean, orders were pouring in from customers. Sales were through the roof. Inventory was flying off the shelves, and the company was really well managed. But it was the same thing when I looked at the bank account. It was always in zero or negative cash. In fact, whenever they had to buy supplies, they had to borrow money from the bank. When they had to borrow money from the bank just to make biweekly payroll to pay its employees. So at this point, I was completely befuddled. But I was a little bit more senior, so I summoned the courage to go speak to the controller of this factory, and I asked him what was going on. And his explanation to me was very simple. He said, Greg, companies are run most efficiently when they're lean. And by lean, he means that lean in cash, so not bloated with extra funds. So it turns out that, as I suspected, this factory was doing fantastic. They were raking in piles of money, but all this cash was being transferred to a separate holding company where it was invested, and they even hired a separate investment management company to manage these funds. So you have this factory that's churning out cash, churning out cash, churning out cash, all the money is being transferred to this holding company where it's invested, and it grows and grows and grows. So what happens is that the management team at the factory, they see how little cash they have left over to meet their monthly expenses, their operational expenses, payroll, supplies, what have you, and they have to budget accordingly, according to what they have left. So if they needed new equipment or they had to hire more staff, they would go to the bank and borrow that money from the bank. They didn't have the luxury of dipping into this massive pile of cash, which is already moved away. And so there's also other legal reasons for doing this that I don't want to get into for fear of cramming too much into the speech. But what I realized was that the more businesses that I worked for, this is how all successful corporations are run. And so a light bulb kind of went off in my head to think, this is ingenious. Like, why don't I run my own personal finances the way successful corporations run their business? I'm the factory. My investment account is my holding company. So whenever I had, when I get my biweekly paycheck every couple of weeks, I transfer as much as I can into my investment account. It could be an RSP, TFSA, or just an investment account that earns interest. And whatever I'm left over with is what I use to budget my daily living expenses, food, clothing, household items. And so I have to squeeze as much as I can out of every dollar. So if I had an unexpectedly large expense or I wanted to treat myself to something nice, I would go to the bank and borrow that money, and then I would be forced to pay off that loan as quickly as possible so as to minimize my interest. So it kind of keeps you disciplined. Now this has worked really well for me because it sort of gets you into this rhythm where you're shoveling money into this pile and watching it grow. And now even when I see shiny new things like cars and big screen TVs, I'm not even tempted because, believe it or not, it's actually a lot more fun putting your money into a bank account and watching it grow than spending it on depreciable assets that just grow old and fade over time. Now, before you guys get the wrong idea, I don't want you guys to think that I'm a rich man by any stretch of the imagination. I just wanted to relate a story that seems to be working for me and has worked for a lot of the businesses that I've seen along the way. So I do want to add two final caveats before I wrap up. The first is that you should invest carefully and make educated decisions. In the long run, markets do generally tend to go up, but it's not always a smooth ride. The shares of that credit card company that I bought back in 2006, I've been lucky. They've done well for me, but I've also picked my fair share of losers that have cost me a lot of money along the way. So make sure that you have a diversified portfolio. Also, the equity and real estate markets are at a bit of a pivotal point right now, as I'm sure you've heard, in the sense that they've been going up almost nonstop for the past 10 years. And markets generally don't tend to go up for that long without some corrections along the way. And experts are predicting that we're due for a major correction sometime soon. The second caveat is that I'm not telling you not to live your life. By all means, life is meant to be lived and enjoyed. And we should spend on the things that bring us happiness. But I'm just trying to introduce a little bit of perspective in terms of the way that we think about personal finance. It's not really rocket science. Sometimes all it takes is a little bit of a small tweak in your mindset in order to help you achieve your financial goals. Thank you very much.